Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound. As always, I am your host, Jameson Foster, ethnomusicologist at CU Boulder. And today we are joined by Norwegian black metal icon Thomas Eriksen of both Mork and Udåd. So black metal has been a bit of a blind spot on this channel, and considering how significant the genre is to Norwegian music, and then also, of course, my own love of black metal as well, I figured Thomas was the best guest for the job here because of his own podcast, where he featured in-depth interviews with some pretty heavy hitters in the black metal scene over 30 episodes. But before we get into all of that, Thomas, welcome to the Nordic Sound. How are you doing today, man?
Hey, thanks for having me all the way over there in Colorado or Colorado or however you say it. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, awesome, man. As I said, when we were before I hit record, I've been pretty interested in you for a while. Not in a creepy way, but just I stumbled upon your podcast and I found it, the whole premise of a black metal musician interviewing other black metal musicians to be just a really sort of obvious idea that no one had done before, and it ended up leading to some, really awesome, stuff in there. But then as I dug into your own music, Mork has become probably my favorite black metal band from the last 10 or 20 years or so. And then the stuff you recently did with Udåd has completely blown my mind. So with all of that said, I think the best place for me to start here, what drew you to black metal?
Wow. First off, thank you, by the way,
Yeah,
for the kind words.
yeah, of course.
I I have answered this question a bunch of times across the years, but every time somebody asks this, I just forget about everything. I just need to, you know, find my way back. I suppose, I grew up as an only child in my family. It was only me, and I have had only a few friends. I was kind of an outcast in school and everything like that. So I always been this secluded kind of guy.
Hmm.
And and as an only child, I suppose those kinds of people get more creative in a way, I suppose,
You've got
playing
to
with
entertain yourself.
yeah, absolutely. I remember growing up creating my own books, comic books. I made my own movies, destroyed the family VHS cameras and stuff like that. And early on, I found music, and yeah, I started like I suppose most kids my age. I'm 41 in a couple of months now, and I started with punk rock.
Hmm.
It was accessible. It was what the cool kids were doing, and guitar is cool, And then I picked up the guitar and whatever. And over the years, I have been pulled more and more towards the darker stuff, the darker themes, And I suppose that is what drew me close to black metal in the end as well.
Hmm.
I what's the word? It resonated with me,
Okay.
as a person, I suppose. And I have quite somber areas inside my brain, just
Hmm.
put it like that. And there was something about, when I discovered, Dark Throne stuff from the mid 90s, what they call the Unholy Trinity,
Yeah.
which is, a blaze in another sky, under a funeral moon, and translated hunger and that
Hmm.
stuff. And the most important thing of all is Burzum, obviously,
Hmm.
and his early stuff,
Yep.
even later stuff as well.
Hmm.
There's something about when I heard that stuff and read the lyrics inside the booklets or whatever, and it was like Norwegian lyrics, and that was I wasn't used to that because I was listening to American bands and
Hmm.
English rock bands and stuff, always the English language, but all of a sudden I saw the Norwegian language in a different context, and with the sound and the atmosphere and the music, it all felt it felt like something that was coming from the soil, but even from way before those guys were even born. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
smells like this old. In Norway, we have a word called urkraft,
Hmm.
which I suppose means a force in the nature from way before.
Hmm.
I sound like a simpleton now, but
No, no.
English is my second language,
Yeah,
so
of course. No one is sitting here. I mean, if anyone is sitting here judging you for your English when you are not, from an
yeah,
English-speaking country,
they can just log off and go
yeah,
home.
exactly, exactly. So,
And I think it's that stuff. It's that primal feeling of it all, and
mhm.
it resonated hard with me. And then I just figured I have to create these feelings for myself, and that is what got me started. All alone. Only me.
Okay. Yeah, so this makes a lot of sense for me because you being an only child, you do really have to entertain yourself, quite a bit. I'm lucky enough to have a little brother that I actually get along with quite well and we were able to entertain each other, right? But I
Yeah.
also, remember that, a lot of my only child friends almost always resorted to the arts of some kind in order to express themselves but also entertain themselves. Um, but you're already talking about something pretty interesting here, and that is this long-standing connection between black metal and like this idea of like primal brutality or like this elemental force, right? Um, and I even know that so I teach music appreciation here at the university, and I get one day where I have to teach all of extreme metal to my students in one day, right?
One day.
And I always find that like especially with this generation, they don't get nearly as much exposure to heavy metal. My guess is you or I did, back 20 years ago. And there's always this misunderstanding of it. Like, why would anyone want to make this hideous music, right? But then by the end of the class, when I frame it in terms of like expressing this darkness or expressing this raw brutality or expressing, something one of my students used the best phrases. It's a sadness that is too deep for words. When I showed them, I can't actually remember who that was. That might have been Wolves in the Throne Room, who that was. But I remember that this sentence stuck with me. Right, a sadness too deep for words. And
That's a good one.
yeah, when you frame it in this, no, it was Mutilated Tyrant. It was Mutilated Tyrant when they were doing their NRK performance around the bonfire. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
But it was just this incredibly powerful performance of this indigenous band playing this atmospheric black metal tune around a campfire in the desert. Um, and when you actually frame the music, not in terms of hideous, not in terms of ugly, which it is, and I think that's why we like it, right?
Mm.
But in terms of this aggressive, evil mourning, like all these kinds of ideas, it starts to resonate a little bit more because I don't know about you, but sometimes you just want to express the feeling that things are kind of screwed up in the world we live in, yeah?
I don't want to make your listeners go hang themselves or whatever, but life is, if life is brutal, and life is, it's sorry to say, man, life is more brutal than happy.
Hmm.
Because one thing is for certain, you will die. That's for certain.
Hmm.
Everyone you love will die, and go back to nature in some weird way.
Yeah.
And we talked about, you told me that you have a sibling, and
Hmm.
that is something I never experienced.
Hmm.
So that's also a way, I suppose, the black metal vibe fits for me, because to me, I always have the feeling of loneliness and sort of hopelessness, and the void.
Hmm.
Less company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
That
does.
and that is what is most important to me with the black metal thing, because it means different things for different people. Maybe many people are into the aggressive part,
Hmm.
fuck Christianity and whatever. To me, it's more about the depressive place.
Hmm.
The sadness and the sorrow of life and the meaning of life in general. because Mork is not a rebellious band at all.
Hmm.
I couldn't care about, obviously I am against organized religions and stuff like that
Hmm.
because to me the world would be better off without that stuff
Hmm.
because I'm an atheist.
Hmm.
But even if you are a religious person or you are an atheist, you are stuck with the same principle, which is you will die. And what is the worth here? What's the meaning and all that? And some people try to fool themselves, That's
Hmm.
how it is. And but I sound like an asshole now, but
No, no, not at all. I think you sound like a black metal musician.
to me it's more about the reality, and
Hmm.
that resonates through the music and the vibes too. And when I write my lyrics, which I basically just write as poems, I write them separately,
Awesome.
just almost like, painting with my words,
Hmm.
stuff. So to me, this is extremely personal. It's not just a pop band making catchy songs, I just
Hmm.
happen to be a kick-ass musician and I'm able to make catchy riffs. That's just a plus. But beneath it all, it's all really true and really real for me. I'm living it, and and this is my path.
Hmm. Yeah, no, man, and I think that's very relatable, right? Is the other thing you brought up about, feeling a little bit like a loner or an outsider. And this
Yeah,
genre is really, it's like this odd kind of nihilistic comforting for for outsiders or people who don't feel like they have people to relate to because that was essentially my experience as a kid, not to be a sob story, but I was always the weird one.
yeah,
I was the only one in my entire social sphere to have long hair when I was growing up before it all fell out and I became cursed with baldness. But metal was always, this way of, sort of making, even if you're the weird one, or if you feel alone, it has this really weird way, especially this, these words applied to it are like depressive or atmospheric or melancholic. That side of black metal has this really weird, comforting feeling
yeah. And
that it can give.
you told me that you were growing up, alone as a long hair in your city or whatever. To me, it's basically the same thing because I'm from this little town called Halden in
Hmm.
Norway, and I am the only one, the only black metal guy.
Hmm.
I was that for a great amount of years.
Hmm.
Recent past years, there's a couple of bands that's come along, but most of the time for 20 years, I was the only one. And even before I found black metal, I was still an outsider, even
Hmm.
before I found it. So there's always been this thing with me, being outside of it all.
Yep.
And actually that goes for the black metal scene as well. I don't feel that much a part of it because I still live in Halden, I'm still on my own here and I do my
Yep.
thing, and every once in a while I bump into people from what you can call the scene,
Hmm.
but I don't feel that much part of it, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
This is kind of my journey, in a way.
Hmm.
I just happen to do it been underneath the black metal umbrella.
Yeah. You know, this is so I grew up in around Baltimore, which is it's a city where it's a very especially the suburbs around it are very normative. Like you have your normal people and you have your weird people. And so even when I was in my early 20s, if I were to walk through, a store or something, I would be the one that would be stared at, right? Just because I looked so different, when I don't even try. It's not like I intentionally leave my home trying to look like a freak. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so it's interesting to me that, especially from Halden, you're having a similar situation here. But, I didn't plan for this question, which is why I prefer to just go with the flow, of where the
yeah,
conversation goes. I have frustrating interactions with, especially people from Oslo, where especially when I'm doing work on these Viking reenactments and this Viking music scene, around Midgardsblot and all of that, a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people from Oslo just don't even think that these people exist. that people like Einar Selvik or like the drummers in Folkeport for Nordavinden, they're like,
Mm.
no, they're just American fantasies of what Norwegians act like, which is just the craziest thing to me. That you can have such a small population in a country, but at the same time, people in the city of Oslo will be completely not only oblivious to the existence of this Norwegian music scene, but even deny that it exists when you tell them it exists. Do you
What
sort
kind
of
of
yeah?
what kind of people are you talking about here?
Oh, the chronically online. You know what I mean? We're like the people who spend too much. It's mostly these interactions online, right? Of these Norwegians, where I go into these spaces where people are speaking Norwegian to try and better my ability to read it and write it. And whenever conversations of music come up, either black metal or this Viking music scene, right? There's this idea that it's just Americans LARPing as Vikings, which is that exists too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or
sure.
this idea that black metal musicians were just these church burners in the '90s that they don't really exist anymore.
You
Um,
know, when I was a kid, I played outside as a cowboy,
yeah,
and that's.
that's the same thing.
Yep. And we even love Western music over here,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Halden, the ma majority of the music scene in this city is Western and roots and Americana based.
Oh,
So
Nordicana is a big
it's
movement right
I
now.
I have it up to here.
Yeah.
Because of all that exposure I get over here, I'm already sick and tired of Western music. I'm sorry.
No, that's amazing.
I grew up on the shit, and it's even bloomed even more now later years because all the guys back in the day when I started my music career, in the mid to late 90s, most of the people played in punk bands and rock
Hmm.
bands.
Hmm.
Everybody wanted to sound like Dead Moon or L7 or the Ramones or whatever,
Yeah.
or the us younger guys, we were going Green Day, Nirvana and
Hmm.
stuff. But all of the a bit older guys, and even my generation too, now everyone has changed to the country thing and the Western thing. Everyone. And then in the middle of all this, I'm standing, the one church burner.
Oh, that's
Uh,
amazing. Yeah, I mean, I apologize for it. I've got my bass back here, and I play bluegrass, so I'm sorry that I'm part of the problem.
no, you,
But
you know what I mean? I do dig some of the stuff,
oh yeah, yeah.
obviously, like especially bluegrass because
Hmm.
it's such an old thing.
Yeah.
And I love listening back to the earliest recordings and stuff. I'm just fascinated by stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, but that's your heritage.
I love it. The
So,
the Americans are fixating on Norwegian heritage, and the Norwegians
yeah,
are fixating on American heritage.
yeah,
The
but
gra
the grass is always
I
greener.
was just about to say the grass is always greener.
That's just how it is. I have a good friend in who lives in the New Orleans area.
Hmm.
And he went to visit me recently, and he loves it over here, even though it's cold and it's wet and I'm tired of that kind of weather, and I want to go over there to his moist, boiling thing.
Yeah, you want
You
to go
know,
wrestle a crocodile, right?
yeah, yeah, but that's just how it is. When you're stuck one place, you want to go another place.
Yeah, no, beautifully.
But
Yeah.
uh, but I don't think I could ever live permanently at that place different than Norway and still be able to create my black metal though, if you
Hmm.
know what I mean,
Yeah.
because we are influenced by our surroundings.
Yeah, I mean, like that circles right back around to how this conversation started, right?
Yeah,
It's like it's very much a part of your environment, your surroundings.
yeah,
Yeah, so great. Let's actually get into talking about your podcast, right? The Thomas
sure.
Eriksen podcast. I know you haven't done it for a couple years, but the this is more for other people to sort of maybe learn through you about what sort of you learned about doing that podcast. So I guess first off, where did the idea for that podcast come from? Was it just a result of it being COVID and we were all locked up inside, or was there another, or was there something else that brought you to the idea?
I can, I am I can be kind of a spontaneous guy, and I get an idea. Oh fuck, that's a good idea. It doesn't happen a lot, but that was a time that happened.
Hmm.
And this was the first week of the first lockdown in Norway in COVID, the first
Hmm.
one. It was like March or something, 2020. And everything was going to shit. Gigs was being canceled
Hmm.
and whatever. Who knew what was going to happen? And then I thought, a podcast, I can do that right here, right in my living room. I can do a podcast. And that is basically what it was about. And what inspired me is kind of a cliche because
Hmm.
there's tons of podcasts,
Hmm.
even back then.
Yep.
Even more has come along after that, obviously. I'm
Hmm.
talking to one now, I suppose.
Yep.
Yeah. And my good friend from Louisiana too, he also started a podcast after the COVID thing, So everyone started podcast.
Yep.
So just welcome to the team.
Yeah.
And, but to me, it was Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Joe Rogan and a guy called Mark Maron,
Hmm.
the stand-up comedian guy.
Hmm.
It was the long form, really relaxed cup of coffee, gabbing and talking situation that I kind of fell in love with.
Hmm.
It all had this kind of cafeteria vibe to it,
I've
which
never heard anyone put it that way, but that's perfect.
oh, yeah, but that's what I liked about it. And
Hmm.
it's not questions, it's just a conversation going.
Hmm.
And I wanted to try it. And if you go online, I to this day I have not deleted any episodes yet.
Hmm.
Perhaps in the future, I don't know. But for now, I will leave everything out there. It's on YouTube and it's on Spotify and
Hmm.
stuff, I think. And if you go on there and listen to the very early stuff, it's kind of, me just fumbling around alone for 20 minutes, just because the first thing for me was to see and check if I am actually able to keep it going for
Hmm.
an hour or two.
Hmm.
Is it possible? That was my first goal and thing obstacle I had to
Hmm.
overcome was because I do not or didn't want to make 10 minute, half an hour episodes. That was like that's a total no-go. My goal was to keep it for a couple of hours. That was
Hmm.
my goal. And I don't remember who the first guest was, but after a while, I understood that hey, it was actually possible to do it. I
Hmm.
could maintain the conversation for that long, and to me, that was like a check on the list, bucket list. I did that, and it was a COVID project, and
Hmm.
when COVID was more or less blowing over and everything, then I stopped doing it, you know.
Yeah.
But a huge compliment is that several podcasts that I have been visiting as a guest after the fact has told me that I was the inspiration for them starting their podcasts, and
Awesome.
that's just ridiculous, But it's cool. It's cool, I did not expect that. So that was my podcast journey, I suppose.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I get what you're saying here, especially with the idea that it's more of a free form conversation, right? Because especially with black metal, right? We were talking about this before we hit the record button, about how important it is to sort of give musicians the ability to represent themselves. And
Yeah.
that is the whole premise behind this podcast, right? Especially with the whole, most of my time is spent on the Nordic folk music side of things, which is rampant with like misrepresentation and misconceptions and fantasies and all of that. But rather than playing the lecturer, instead I like to just see how conversations with Nordic musicians sort of lead to their own questions and answers, really.
Yes.
And I found that what you did, my three favorite episodes from you was when you talked is it Nag from Tudor,
Yeah.
and Jon Bakker from Kampfar, and then of course the Fenris talk.
Yeah.
Those were what I found listening to all of them, right, is that people who listen to black metal, especially who get really into it, get into that whole cult mentality, right? Where it's just like, the true and the authentic and all of this and this idea of how these musicians are in their personal lives.
Yeah.
But just having a conversation go for an hour and a half, you're like, these are just normal people, right? And that's one of my favorite parts of doing this kind of podcast. Did you find that that was sort of something that you were revealing over time as well? That is like, these aren't all just like these freaks who live in basements doing satanic rituals all day. These are just like normal guys.
Yeah, but trust me, I already knew that way before my
Yeah,
podcast
exactly.
because
Yep.
I am a black metal musician as
Yep.
well.
Hmm.
And we are
Of
all
course.
people, and most of us are the same kind of people too. We
Hmm.
are, outcasts and creative minds and stuff.
Hmm.
So I never believed that bullshit,
Of
But
course. Yep.
the funny thing is that I think maybe I have obtained a couple of haters and stuff because of that very thing. Because my podcast, I kind of removed the sugarcoating and
Hmm.
all the mystique or whatever that people are obsessed with.
Hmm.
Because at the bottom of it all is just regular people that has made music that somebody likes, you know.
Hmm.
But people don't want to grow up. That's just how it is. And
It's
I
scary.
get it's scary to grow up, and I get it because even when I discovered black metal back in the day, it was the church burning and murder and all that stuff, and they looked creepy in the photos.
Hmm.
And of course, I was attracted to that
Hmm.
image, that vibe, and of course you do because I also love watching horror movies. I
Yep.
you know I watched cartoons back in the day when I was a kid. That's just how we work. We are
Hmm.
fans of stuff,
Hmm.
but you can't walk around thinking that those people are real like that. you know that doesn't compute in my head.
Yeah, it's I had the same experience, especially when I hosted an interview with Einar Selvik at the university. I actually was not prepared for the amount of people who were going to get very angry that Einar Selvik does not think he's a Viking.
Okay.
That blew my mind, right? We're like,
Yeah.
so there's Einar, there's the Vardruna performance persona and image, right? And
Yeah.
I thought that that was just obvious to anyone who watched it. But the amount of just angry private messages or comments that I got on the interview or on the posts about how now all of a sudden Einar Selvik is a poser because he's not a Viking. I'm sitting here like, what is happening?
But 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 but,
Yeah,
but, but please be real with me.
yeah.
Define me. What is actually the real poser here? Is it the one who's dressing up and acting to be a certain kind of way, or is it the guy who is honest and just creates art? It's an open question. I'm not pointing fingers,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm too old to act a certain way. I am the way I am.
Hmm.
Of course, I have somber feelings and feel like shit most of the time, but that's just my being.
Hmm.
I still try to somehow function.
Hmm.
You know, you have to function in society. The thing for me is that if I did not have my music,
Hmm.
if I wasn't able or if I didn't find the guitar back at the age of 13,
Hmm.
I don't know if I would be here still. The
Yep.
music to me is my, what's the word, resolution
Sure.
to life or whatever. To me, it's all about me getting to just exercise my shit
Yeah.
instead of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, so to me, it's the most true you can get, you know?
That's the real true.
It's only me with my guitar.
Yep.
I never sit in a gang and write riffs or throw riffs around. I sit alone and create my art. And that's the way it should be, I
Hmm.
think.
So I think without beating this dead horse too much, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was a very important conversation, about how I do really think that one of the big benefits of doing, this sort of this sort of format, right, is exactly what you said. You sort of peek behind the curtain, or you get rid of any of the illusion, right? And I think that you and I both agree that it's valuable and it's worthwhile doing that. But at the same time, I think we're both surprised at how important that illusion is for a lot of people. Like that's
Yeah,
just not what I was. Yeah,
yeah, and don't get me wrong.
yeah,
We also use the corpse paint when we
of
perform
course.
with Mork. This is all the visual feel of it, you
Hmm.
know? And to me, it's more like a war paint, or,
Yep.
like bringing out my inner. It's stupid to call it an inner demon, but you know where I'm going with
I
this.
don't think it sounds stupid at all.
No, it's it's the primal part of me
Hmm.
that comes out through that, and that
Yep.
is an exercise I do on stage. I don't bring that with me into the grocery store, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the Vikings did, I suppose, and the Indians, painted
Hmm.
themselves and danced around the pole or whatever.
Hmm.
It's a ritual, you know,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
that's what it is, and it's beautiful that we have that.
Yeah. I mean, beautifully said, man. I have a colleague here at CU, a Nigerian musicologist, and her specialty is masked music performance.
Yeah,
And we were talking about corpse paint, right? Which, to her being from Nigeria, black metal was a lot to drop on her at once, right? But when she was looking at the corpse paint, she asked, is this considered a mask? And we were talking about it, and I said, why? Like, why do you ask? And she said, because if it does count as a mask, right, the purpose of a mask across world music traditions is to allow the performer to take on either a different persona, or allow them to bring out something deep within them that they have to hide in, daily life. And that completely having that sort of surprising Nigerian perspective on how corpse paint is a mask, like that blew my mind. And everything you just said really sort of goes along with that as well.
yeah, but keep in mind, this is
Hmm.
my opinions.
Yeah, of course.
I am sure there will be haters in the comment section of your video here. I'm sure of it.
Oh, it's
But
YouTube
that's
after all.
Yeah, yeah, but hey, it's okay. It's
Yep.
okay. People experience all this stuff differently,
Hmm.
you know.
Absolutely.
But to me, it is what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Beautifully said. So I think it's about time we start actually talking about Mork.
sure.
Sound good to you, man?
And
Yeah.
by the way, I don't have any time restrictions, so just keep it going as long
Oh,
as you want.
cool. Sounds good, man. Yeah. Also, yeah, thanks for telling me that. I always operate under the assumption of an hour, just because the last few guests I've had an hour.
Yeah, no.
But I'm also not going to hold you hostage here for like 8 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
no, no,
sure.
no, because I'm having a good time. So if you're having a good time, that's all the better.
I will let
So
you know if I'm tired.
okay, yeah, because I know that speaking in a second language can just deplete the brain way faster. So I like to be aware of that.
But
Um,
we are good to go.
cool, man. Yeah. So Mork,
Yes.
this I said at the top of the recording that, and I'm not exaggerating or buttering you up just because you came onto the podcast, but genuinely, Mork is the black metal band that I have listened to the most over the last 2 years. Just because, like, from your very first album all the way up to Suv, it's just like it never stays in one place for too long. And this most recent album is probably the best example of that, because I know you're probably aware of the feeling where you will put on a death metal album or a black metal album, and you get 2 songs in, and then you think to yourself, "Oh, so this is going to be the whole album? Is this wall of sound beginning to end?" And sometimes I'm up for it, but especially listening to Soothe, I get like 3 songs in, and I'm like, I don't know what's coming next. It's kind of like a kaleidoscope. And so with that in mind, I'm sort of like curious, how do you already mentioned, that you write a lot of this by yourself, just you and your guitar and all of that. But like, considering black metal has this history of like a dogma of like what it should sound like and what it's supposed to sound like, right? You incorporate so many like prog elements into the music. And So I guess I'll just let you go anywhere you want with that, right? So like when you're approaching writing Suv or any album from Mork, how do you go about that, considering the expectations put on black metal musicians to adhere to a certain style, I guess?
Yeah, there's always the truce, the gang of the elitists,
Hmm.
that it should only be that way and stay that way forever. That
Hmm.
will, but that's every genre. I'm sure
Yes.
you have the same bullshit in bluegrass,
Oh my God, don't even get me started, especially in
Yeah,
Colorado. This is like the mecca of the true bluegrass. It's
yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah. I know, but it's no different for metal
Yep.
genres,
Hmm.
and I suppose especially black metal. And but the thing is, my first couple of albums,
Hmm.
I was not trying, but I was aiming more towards the classic black metal thing, the
Hmm.
classic sound, the classic way of riffs and the feel of it, because that was what I was into that music,
Hmm.
I Dark Throne and Burzum really gave me strong vibe that I wanted to exercise
Hmm.
on my own. But I was never copying anything because I don't think I'm able to copy because I'm suppose I'm too stubborn and too creative to copy stuff. So you will always recognize it's my riff, I suppose, or my song, I
Hmm.
think, in arrangements and tonalities. But it was more strict for the first couple of albums, and then before the third album, I got my big record contract,
Hmm.
which was with the Peaceful Records, which is like a independent big label from the UK with global distribution.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden it became a bit more serious, Then I realized, wow, this is actually now becoming my path, and this is what I'm doing. It's not just a side project or, something I'm dabbling with for fun. It's getting real.
Hmm.
And then from then on, the albums evolved more and more for each album. Because I don't want to just repeat one thing,
Hmm.
too many other bands do that, I want to walk my path and just what I experience is what I experience, and that comes out in the music.
Hmm.
Either if it's a movie I've seen, a emotion I've gotten from an interaction, or something I just see in the world, it's something I will, put into my music at the same time as, uh, you're a musician.
Hmm.
When you're playing, you never know what can come along,
Yeah.
what two notes that comes after one another. You never know that, and that's the beautiful part about just being creative and spontaneous and stuff like that. And I have more influence than just Dark Throne and Burzum. It's way more. I grew up on punk rock. I heard country. I heard pop music. I
Hmm.
heard polka and jazz and blues and, folk music. But I think when I'm creating music, I never actually think about specific musical genres. It's mostly just feelings.
Hmm.
And since I've been doing metal for such a long while now, it's naturally the way it comes out.
Hmm.
That's a dead given. I don't have to concentrate on
Okay.
making it metal,
Hmm.
It's just a dead given. It just comes out like that. But my tonalities and chord progressions and maybe even arrangements is a bit on the fly, on the go. It's not a set box that I'm working within here. And I suppose that's why the Mork albums sounds the way they do,
Yep.
because I'm just being honest with myself and I don't try to maintain any guidelines, to put it like that, because this is such an important part for me to just expand myself,
Hmm.
and some people can take it and others can't, I of course I get shit for not being true enough or whatever they
Not
say.
enough blast beats.
Yeah, and then not enough monotony and
Hmm.
Oh, he put in some clean vocals here and there, you know.
Ooh, that yeah.
Ooh.
That's what I noticed listening to Suv. I was like, oh, how can he get away with this?
Yeah, especially the last song on that album, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's an acoustic lullaby, you know.
Yep.
Timer er monotone, ikke vil jeg forsone. Fjern meg fra denne verden, er til endes med ferden.
But I don't, to me, the only rule I have is that it needs to feel right for me
Mm-hmm.
in the moment I'm doing it. Of course, I can look back and cringe, you know, sometimes of some portion of some song
Mm-hmm.
or titles or lyrics, but it's a part of my journey. When I die, I hope that this will be what I leave behind,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because
Yeah.
when I'm gone, I'm gone. There's nothing more, you know.
Yeah, man. Beautifully said. I mean, you kind of already answered the next question that was on my mind, where, there's this idea that music can either be very composed or it can be very, intuitive. It can be very not exactly improvised, but it just comes out, right?
Yep.
And especially musicologists will put this on a spectrum between Beethoven and Mozart, where like Beethoven is like the hard work, make sure all of this happens. Mozart is just sit at a piano and let it all come out. And I was curious, like what part of the spectrum is your writing process on? I'm getting a feeling that it's more of like that Mozart intuitive side of things, or do you also spend a good amount of time sort of like composing and really trying to work things out?
The autist spectrum?
Oh yeah.
I think it's a whole lot of that going on too in the music
Okay.
scene. No, you know, up to now, I suppose,
Hmm.
from the first album and up to now, I suppose I'm more of the free flow, quick
Hmm.
writing, spontaneous writing kind of thing. But at my current album that I'm working on now,
Hmm.
I suppose now I'm trying to not plan out, but trying to use a bit more time,
Okay.
you know. And that's a bit of a new step for me because I'm used to the Mork albums are all just puked out in a sense, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And that has been working for me personally for a long while. But now I would like to maybe just try a different approach and see what that can bring along, you know.
Hmm.
It's still, trust me, it's still quite spontaneous, but a bit more afterthought.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool to know. So like how do you approach like the whole idea of an album then, right? Do you sort of like puke, to use your words, do you puke out a whole bunch of stuff and then sort of see how it might fit together and then an album comes around, or do you start with an idea of an album and then sort of then puke things up in accordance to what that idea for the album is like?
It That's a bit of both,
Hmm.
actually. Back in the day with the first albums, they were more conceptual in a
Okay.
way. I was deciding, oh, this is an album, and I will write 10 songs for that album, kind of thing. But not anymore. Now I have way more songs, and
Hmm.
you should see my vaults.
Okay.
There's a ridiculous amount of songs. I have, I have periods where I have like this writer's block,
Hmm.
where I struggle to get a riff good and a song good and
Hmm.
stuff. But all of a sudden, I have this flush of ideas, and I basically, or maybe some days I can write two songs,
Hmm.
write at least a song every day, kind of thing, which is obviously good. And when those periods are here, I try to make the best of it. And the last couple of years has been really nice to me in
Yeah.
that creative realm, to put it like that. So
Hmm.
I'm really excited about the new album I'm working on now. I think that will be you always love your latest release. That's just how it should be. But I
Hmm.
have a strong feeling about this one. And so yeah, I suppose a bit of both.
Hell yeah, man. Now you've got me excited for it too. Especially because I didn't even know it, I haven't even heard you talk about a next album yet. So now I'm consider me seduced.
Yeah,
But
this has happened quite quickly the couple of last months that the album has really taken shape. So
awesome. So there's it's not only the musical content, right? Like your actual songwriting style that always sounds like Mork to me. There's always, and this is making a lot more sense, especially considering what you talked about earlier with, um, the urkraft being very important to you with the sound. Your all of your records just sound so warm and analog. You know what I mean? Like even if I'm streaming it, it sounds like I've put on a vinyl, right? And that the only way I can really describe it is it has like that earthy warm sound to it, and it could be like the lack of, I don't hear a lot of drum triggers, right? If you do have them, they are very well hidden, but I like when I hear the bass drum, I hear a bass drum, right? And there's so many other elements as well, right? So is that related, this idea of urkraft to your approach to having your albums actually sound pretty organic? Or is there more into it as well?
uh, to put I suppose album one until four perhaps is probably the most urkraft driven albums, I
Hmm.
suppose. The catering to the black metal aesthetic that I fell in love with.
Hmm.
After those albums, I feel personally that I'm not moving away from it, but
Hmm.
I'm not taking as much consideration to that
Hmm.
element anymore. It's still there, obviously, but
Hmm.
it's more important to me to evolve as a person
Hmm.
and as a songwriter, I suppose. And regarding the production and the sound, and you're talking about warmth and analog and stuff, and I am a child, not a child of the 70s. That's wrong to say because I'm born in 1984.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of older music,
Hmm.
70s music, 60s music, and
Hmm.
then you know what that's about.
Yeah.
It's
The
it's
golden
it's
age of
all
recording.
yeah, and that's and one cool thing I should give some credit to where it's due to Fenris because he made me really aware of the bass drum sounds of music in general,
Hmm.
and he really puts his point clearly
Hmm.
through. And before that, I didn't enjoy clicking or whatever drums, but
Hmm.
I didn't pay that much attention to that stuff
Yep.
before he pointed it out, I think. So I do very much agree that the bass drum should be a bass drum. It shouldn't live in the mids to highs section of a mix. It should have its place as the heartbeat.
Hmm.
And that is also why Mork isn't really a blast beat band. My music isn't blast beat driven. And if you listen to the Mork albums, you can hear it's a lot of groovy stuff. And my bass guitar work is living its completely different, separate life from the guitar riffs because I need that moving, feeling your blood flowing in your
Hmm.
veins, and it's organic being, you know, and that's I suppose that's how I view my music in a way.
It's interesting to me that we both are drawn to Fenris's sort of mandates or his whole ethos about sort of music production because he was who was on my mind, when I'm asking this question. Um, Eternal Hails, the that Dark Throne album was I grabbed it on vinyl and put it on, and it's just like how it reminds me of the same feeling of when I listened to my very first Metallica vinyl, which was Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
And then it blew my mind when I then was sort of It might have been on your podcast or it was somewhere else where he was talking about how the main motivation for the sound of that album, Eternal Hails, was Ride the Lightning. And it was this crazy cosmic alignment to me where he sort of, you are right, he kicks the door down in every single interview. He does, he has his war on compression, which we could all use more antagonism towards compression. But just
Yeah,
the idea that somewhere along the way, music doesn't sound like you're in the room with it anymore in recordings, and it very much sounds like you're listening to this digital production of it that is being put in front of you. Where when I still put on my Ride the Lightning vinyl, I actually feel like I'm in the basement with them when they're playing,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it opens up the door for a whole different level of expression because when the entire mix is not squished into this small area, you actually allow these other instruments to breathe. And you bring up the bass, which was literally next up I wanted to talk to you about as a bassist, where I so admire and appreciate the fact that you treat the bass like its own instrument. And that really came through with Suv. Like the whole time I'm listening to it, I couldn't remember the last time I listened to a metal album where the bass was actually treated with so much respect and care. So yeah, it all. Do you want to say a little bit more about how all of that, the whole idea around like the sound and the groove and this idea of vintage recording and all of that feeds back into your approach of how you write songs for Mork?
Yeah, that's the beauty for me because I'm a single, songwriter. I
Hmm.
don't share songwriting with anyone.
Hmm.
This is everything is written by me, and I have this overall view of things, and I have the freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want with the music, and that is why I'm doing this. I really love creating my music
Hmm.
because it's my alone time, it's my therapy, it's my, what can you call it, meditation
Hmm.
process, I suppose. And to me, it's a it's a rewarding process to, you know, I make a guitar riff, and if the guitar riff is, primitive or whatever, then okay, I figure out how the drum pattern should be. And then the bass to me is what gives it the soul, the the color of the thing. The
Hmm.
mood comes from the bass, and what's beautiful about this is that if the riff is in one, one scale or one note or whatever, the bass can change the root notes around that, and you
Hmm.
can change the entire, mood of the thing. And I think the most rewarding thing of the process to me is putting on the bass guitar, uh, because it's boundless.
Hmm. That comes
Uh,
through in the recordings. Like when I hear that bass going off on its own, I'm like, oh, he's having too much fun with this.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And I suppose, who taught me that? I think that's probably a combination of Geezer Butler.
Hmm.
He played his bass almost like a guitar solo
Hmm.
on to Naomi's riffs. So he was probably the first one for me. And then you have John Paul Jones doing stuff. And I was thinking about someone else just now. I think perhaps the Stu Cook of CCR,
Hmm.
actually.
Oh
I
yeah.
grew, yeah, I grew up on Creedence, big time.
I okay, we could have a whole other conversation about Credence. It's one of my favorite bands of all time. So
I
that's
have
actually
a tremendous respect for Joel Fogerty and what he created.
yeah, man. And then we're gonna go on a tangent if we start talking about CCR. I mean, like that's the whole idea that they fit right into like the Beatles stopped touring, Led Zeppelin hasn't gotten big yet, and they just fit like a glove, and then broke up over creative differences. And it's but when you actually look at the albums they produced in such a small time frame, and how
Yeah.
many hits and just, oh my God, man. And I love that you bring it up because that's the production style that I associate Mork with. You know, the
Yeah, yes.
same sound, like it's at least the production of that
Listen
organic
to
70s. Yeah.
listen to those. I don't know how many Creedence albums there are. That's good, but there may be five or something. I don't
Hmm.
remember. I haven't counted them.
Yeah.
No,
It's
but you
somewhere
know
in
what I
that
mean.
ballpark.
Yeah, everything up to Mardi Gras,
Yeah.
but more or less. Talking about earthy sound and
Hmm.
authentic sounds, and the funny part about Creedence is that I suppose you guys over there are, experts in fighting across the borders and stuff, but they are in fact what you guys consider a poser band, I suppose, because they were from what is it, San Francisco area, and
Yep.
they are pretending to be from the deep south.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't really matter because it sounds so fucking good, and you
Hmm.
know that that guy, he's really feeling this stuff, you know. There's not a fake bone in that guy's body, you know, even though he was born at the wrong place. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean, this, yeah, I wasn't even expecting this to go back into the conversation we were just having, right? We're like, I even sometimes feel like we prefer to be lied to about where people are from because if you think about the Beatles at the
Yeah,
most basic, right? The
yeah,
Beatles were these Liverpool guys that had to clean up to, fit this image, but then the Rolling Stones are from the middle class and then dress themselves up as the Liverpool guys and they're more successful pretending to be each other. Like
yeah,
it's and then what you talk about, right? These San Francisco boys
yeah,
are LARPing as Bayou folk, but
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that like I think exactly what you said. I think it would be unusual for me to see anyone claiming that John Fogerty was not feeling it, right?
Oh no,
Because
no.
like I mean that he became the music, right?
Yeah, yeah. You can, of course, people can say stuff, but you look pretty stupid saying that. I'm sorry, that
Yeah.
you're just naive and stupid then. You
I
know,
mean, yeah,
you
man.
are neglecting reality by
Mhm.
saying stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
and it does put a weird spin on it when like when you do tell someone they're not from the right place, right? To
yeah.
like make a certain kind of music. Um, but then so okay, so we're talking about Mork here, and
Mm,
you use these two specific words or these phrases. You talk about it's organic, and then you also said it feels like blood flowing in your veins. That's
yeah.
the perfect setup for me to ask you about Udåd.
Okay.
Because if Mork is the blood flowing in your veins, at least to me, Udåd is it freezing in my veins. The way that I put it in my review of it that I did back when it came out was like I've seen other reviewers. I'm thinking of Angry Metal Guy, who talk about your albums as sounding like these beautifully wrought cathedrals, right? Like it has a lot of architecture in them. But then I say that Udod sounds like the abandoned shack in the backyard of that cathedral,
Mm.
because I you talk about your love of horror movies. The whole time I'm listening to this album, I'm like horrified, but I'm also in love with it. And it's like this really odd, hideous beauty that just puts so many contradictions. And anyway, Udod, what was your inspiration for this, especially considering that you already have this established band? So maybe you can either approach it one of two ways. Why could this have not been a Mork album? Or
Mm.
what was your motivation for just doing this kind of sound in the first place?
The thing is, I already talked about this, that
Hmm.
Mork is, my main path and journey,
Hmm.
and, since it's such an important part of my being now, I don't want to rob anything from the Mork experience, so I will
Hmm.
always evolve that, you know, more or less,
Hmm.
up to this point at least. And a couple of years back, I felt that, oh man, I need something complete opposite of that.
Hmm.
I wanted to go back to what made me do Mork in the first place,
Hmm.
which was the more evil and primal thing,
Hmm.
you know. And if you go back and listen to Isebakke, the first album, and I suppose the second album too, it's way more dirty and primitive, deep in the dirt kind of vibe. And that is something I'm kind of missing now. But it feels wrong to suddenly just do that with Mork now. You know,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
it would be like pulling over in the wrong lane and getting hit by a bus. You know,
All right.
in my head at least.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
and
that's the most
what?
important head that matters in this conversation.
Yeah. That's true. I suppose. Can't help that.
Yeah.
But what really kicked me into gear with that stuff was when I visited a tattoo artist in Bergen. Actually, she has a lot to do with the Viking stuff. You probably
Hmm.
know her, Jannicke.
Oh,
Jannicke Weiss
yes.
Hansen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say we're very good friends. We haven't interacted as much as I wish we have, but
Yeah.
we're in the same place at least for Midgardsblot, and we've been in the
Oh,
same online
absolutely.
areas. Yeah.
She's hugely into the Viking stuff,
Hmm.
and she's done some pieces on me. This is like
Oh, hell yeah.
this is a carved picture of Odin,
Hmm.
with one blind eye and everything, because I'm also kind of blind-eyed
Okay.
from birth, actually.
Oh
But
yeah.
wearing my corpse paint, that
Okay.
was just a cool thing. And this is made in this wooden carved style that she
Hmm.
does, which is beautiful.
Yeah,
And
no, I love it when
this
she
was,
posts her work. Yeah.
yeah, this was actually originally this was a gift I got from a Ukrainian couple, actually, who carved
Okay.
this on a board that I have hanging upstairs, and I just wanted to put it on my arm.
Oh, hell yeah.
So I don't remember if it was that time she did that one or some
Hmm.
other tattoo I have,
Hmm.
but she told me about, because she was there at the beginning in Bergen when Bursum and everything started.
Hmm.
She knew that guy and was there in the beginning. And I remember she telling me that Bursum was really inspired by this German art movie. Uh, which was it's called the Der Todesking,
Okay.
which translates to the Death King.
Hmm.
And the director is Jorg Butgerheit, I believe. He did. I don't know if you're into horror or whatnot, but he did the necromantic movies. If you've seen
Okay.
them,
No, I
he
haven't.
did.
I love horror. I've never dorked out about it though. I should.
Oh, this is kind of a deep dive and really
Do it.
far out stuff.
Do it.
But he did two necromantic movies, and then he did a short called Der Todesking, which was then an inspirational source for Bursum, I was told.
Okay.
Especially, he even stole, ripped music off from that movie and made riffs,
Okay.
which I was like, oh shit, I didn't know this. So. And I went home from that meeting or that tattoo appointment or whatever, and I watched the movie, and it's pretty dark. It's it doesn't get more nihilistic than that. It's life is pointless. The entire thing about that film is about suicide and death,
Hmm.
and rotting corpses, and how life is just an organic thing that dies.
Hmm.
And this inspired me so much. And I already wanted to do some more primitive black metal, but
Hmm.
that pushed me over the edge there. So after seeing that movie, I basically created the Udåd album in a really short while. I think it was maybe 1 or 2 weeks, a span of 2 weeks maybe.
Are you
And that's
serious?
and
You
that's
did.
then and that's basically the same precise way I created the first Mork album, because that was a rush of
Hmm.
inspirational flow that I just had to do during the next week or whatever.
Hmm.
So they were created kind of the same way, but Udåd is way more depressive and more
Hmm.
of the emptiness of life and the,
Hmm.
the void I was talking about. So that is what inspired that. And I tried to feel out the riffs, because you have heard the latest Mork stuff. It's way more progressive and stuff.
Hmm.
And I have to put a lid on that, put
Hmm.
the weight down. I'm trying to hold back, not to expand and evolve and play around with themes, because that's a bit of a struggle for me these days. At
Hmm.
least for the Udåd stuff, is that keeping it simple and only the most necessary stuff, and just maintaining that vibe and flow through it. And
Hmm.
I think I nailed it with the album. When I was finished with it, I was really satisfied, and I tried at once to shop it around to labels, because this is something I want to have out. I
Hmm.
want to get it off my shoulders and out there. And my first idea was actually I wanted to put it out, incognito.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to have my name on it,
Okay.
because with my name comes what you say, not criticize, but what people kind of, oh, it's the guy from Mork.
Yeah, associations with the
Yeah,
name.
yeah, I didn't want to have that,
Hmm.
but Peaceville, luckily they said yes to taking in my album, but they wanted to put my name on it,
Hmm.
and I couldn't really argue with them. So it just happened to be that way. But at least it's out there, and it's another part of me right now,
Hmm.
the Udod thing. And now I have a yin to my yang. I have the Mork thing, and I have the primitive, more urkraft-ish,
Yeah, yeah.
primal scream, which is my Udod path, which is a bit smaller, more crooked path with more overgrown path stuff. While Mork is more evolving.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much to be said to have that outlet as an artist. So I don't know if you went to school for music or anything, but I went to school for music, and it instills this expectation on you that things have to be complicated or things have to be complex, right? And it took me years to get past that. But what ultimately got me past it was I learned how to play the banjo.
Yeah.
And you can't, especially the way I play is clawhammer banjo, which is very, very simple way of playing it. And that was a way that I forced myself to make music in a way that was simpler than what my music theory or composition classes taught me to do, right?
Okay.
And so I relate a lot to what you're talking about, especially as you watch Mork evolve into this
Mm,
grand wrought cathedral, right? You do
mm.
find yourself sort of looking at that crooked path out the window and sort of being like, I want to go walk down that path again.
Yes.
And what comes out is, I'll say it is one of the most unique and individual albums that I've heard in black metal in at least the last decade or so. And where
Thank
like
you.
it just stuck with me. And even just a few nights ago, probably because I was subconsciously, preparing for this conversation. I put my headphones in, and every night I go for a walk and listen to an album. And it was raining, and I had that album in my headphones, and I was like, God damn, I'm about to be murdered, and this is on point for this album. Like, that's what's gonna happen, right? So you did nail that depressive, atmospheric urkraft approach for it. What was the reception like on this album? And I know, especially with something like this, it's more for you than for anyone else. But I am curious if like maybe the reception surprised you at all, or sort of what did you experience on that side of things?
Well, to answer your first question, no, I'm not schooled at all.
Okay,
I never been. I'm self-taught from the beginning.
good.
But no, you know what? I was kind of, I should say, disappointed, because I maybe I'm not paying too much attention online or whatever. But
Hmm.
I don't think the album did an impact at all. Actually,
Hmm.
I think it was released in a void. It felt
Hmm.
like, and that was in March or something
Hmm.
last year.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, that's it's still my I had to get it off my shoulders anyhow, so I'm happy in that manner, you know.
Hmm.
But hopefully, maybe someone will find this down the road or stumble across it or whatever. But now, recently, this Easter, we actually made the first Udåd live appearances,
Oh, that's right. Yeah. How
and
did that go?
that was like precisely a year later,
Yeah.
you know. And no, that was a big surprise. We played the Inferno Festival in Oslo, and
Hmm.
then we played in Munich in Germany, the Dark Easter Metal Meeting Festival. And both was great. It was packed rooms and
Hmm.
atmosphere and all. So that was a surprise and you know, a little thumbs up, you know. And because a year ago I wasn't even planning to do this live at all.
Hmm.
It was just this dark little thing I needed to get out, you know, this blood clot that had to run out. And but you know, after a while, I was like, yeah, it would be cool to try to maybe perform live, you know. And then I asked some people if they wanted to join me and try it out, you know, and the rest is history.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I think that, especially in today's day and age, it's out there. People will find it eventually,
Yeah,
and I would not be surprised if it became like this sleeper cult hit in a few decades, where that's what the new true circle finds, because it has, as I said, it's very unique, and I guess how did you approach like the actual sound of it? Because you captured that sound of a vintage horror movie so perfectly, and it's so raw, like skeletal, like especially in the sound of the guitar with like did you have any inspiration for how to actually go about the sound of the guitars and the production, or were you just throwing things at a wall and seeing what stuck?
no, you know, stuff like that I have to feel out, you
Yeah, yeah.
know. It needs to be on the point, and that's the truth with this too. I felt it out, you know, and this was what was after, you know, and one thing that was pre-decided was basically the vocals is weird as fuck, you know. I wasn't used to, if you can call it singing that way, because this was like draining me totally, you know. I was shouting from the top of my lungs, you know, and was
Hmm.
exhausted after each take. But to have it buried in the back like that, which it is, my intention was to keep it even further back,
Hmm.
you know. But Peaceville wanted to maybe have it a bit more pushed up front, so
Hmm.
we hit the middle there somewhere. But that was, you know, that's how can I say it? In Mork, the vocals is the vocals, you know, but in Udåd, the vocal is more like an effect, or it's an instrument, you know.
Hmm.
It's not that important to me that you can hear the words or whatever. It's
Hmm.
more important that you basically can't hear the words, because then it doesn't take away from the, you know, overall vibe, which it is, you know.
Hmm.
It's all about the vibe. And that's why I did the album too. It's because of that. You said it, skeletal, earthy, evil, cold vibe, you know. And yeah, I think,
Are you familiar with? I'm assuming you've watched the Blair Witch Project.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So I grew up only 30, 40 minutes away from that forest.
really.
And yeah, and that's actually just what the woods look like in Maryland, in the state of Maryland. So after I watched that movie for the first time as a kid, I couldn't go out in the woods, right? I couldn't do it because it looks like the setting of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But as I grew up, I actually started to appreciate, especially what those woods look like in the winter and the fall, right? That very
Yeah.
creepy. And I just have to tell you, the closest association I had to Udod was it gave me the same feeling of watching the Blair Witch Project. It gave me the same feeling of walking through those woods and being like, are they going to get me? You come across like this old Civil War era stone house that crumbled down in the middle of the woods, and I'm like, I'm staying the fuck away from that. And like that's the feeling that this album gave me.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what? I'm not joking now, but that movie was actually really important to me. I saw it when it came out in
mhm.
theaters. you know, and it left a lasting impression on me. And if I can see it, if I see it tonight, you know, I will still probably get inspired.
That's
It's
incredible, man.
because that movie is really impactful, at least to me.
Hmm.
So there you go. Fun. I didn't even know. I played in Baltimore last year. You know, I didn't know it was in the neighborhood of that forest.
Yeah, well, so this movie, if I remember correctly, it takes place in Western Maryland, which is, that would be about an hour, 2 hour drive maybe from Baltimore.
Wow.
But yeah, no, so same general area. Maybe next time you're in Baltimore, and you have a day after the tour, you could take a little road trip out to where to where that took place. But yeah, I mean, like that's cosmic to me that that film was is so foundational to you because that is the first thing I thought of when I was listening to that album, and that
But
was
I probably
also yeah
Yeah, but I probably don't think about the movie
yeah. Hmm.
in a creative way, you know. But when you mention it, it has been impactful. And if I ever got to visit that place, you know,
Hmm.
that would mean something to me, you know. I because I love that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to filming locations and stuff.
Hmm.
I like that stuff.
Yeah.
And I would probably appreciate it a whole lot if I got to visit those locations, you know. And yeah,
Yeah, if I was
I would,
still in Baltimore, I would definitely I would definitely have showed you around, but maybe next time I'll like show you on a map and all that. And yeah, do a cult photo shoot, you know.
be awesome. Have you ever gone to the precise places?
Not the precise place because when I lived in Maryland, I was still, last time I lived in Maryland, early 20s, at that point I was either too busy, but then when I was younger, I you would not have been able to pay me enough money to go to that spot like when I was
Oh,
younger, right? Like
freaked out.
no way that's
Yeah,
happening, right?
yeah. But hey, I understand that, you know. We all have vivid imaginations, and
Yeah.
that's why we also are able to create music and stuff.
Hmm.
It all fits together. We get to, dream about stuff and imagine stuff, and
Hmm.
that's super important.
Yeah, and to me, that's why I sort of even said at the top of this interview that like, when I actually find it so valuable to teach this to at least try and teach appreciation of this music style to college students is
Mm.
because it really does open up especially students who spend a lot of time in like the EDM sphere or even just, pop music and they just listen to what Spotify tells them to listen to. There's
Yeah.
this idea that like music has to sound a certain way. It has to be, you have to sing along, you have to dance to it, it has to have a nice beat, it has to have. And one of my biggest jobs I give myself throughout the semester is to get the students to stop thinking that music has to sound a certain way to be music.
Yeah.
Because then once you put down those walls of like, this isn't singing, right? Or, oh, this isn't music, right? You can actually start to appreciate the different things that music can express. Because I remember I showed my students Convent. I don't know if you're familiar with Convent. It's that
I'm
all
not sure.
is that Danish death metal band, just a bunch of ladies just like crushing these doom riffs like nothing. And I played a live performance of them, and one of the first questions is why does she sing like that? And the question I gave back to the student was, how would you sing that emotion?
Mm. Yeah.
And they're like, okay, you got me, right?
Yeah.
Because when you actually put it that way, like, how would you express this emotion in a different way through singing? You can, right? And so once you put down those walls of like what a singing voice is supposed to sound like, you can actually start to appreciate these darker, not even necessarily dark, but just all of these diverse ways of expressing emotions through music that can't be expressed through like the sound of pop music, right? And the Blair Witch Udåd connection is an incredible example of that. I'm
Mm.
not singing about the Blair Witch Project, maybe in like a dark bluegrass way that would be kind of creepy, but like otherwise you're not really going to accomplish that with with a different sound. And that's sort
No,
of to
but
me what black metal is for.
yeah, just to keep in mind, where did it start? It probably started with some guy who was naked and dirty somewhere beating a stick on a rock. You know, that's how music started, you know, and people made noises with their mouths, and maybe at the same time even. And then you had
Hmm.
chanting, and then so it shouldn't be weird at all for anyone.
Hmm.
That music is a broad term,
Hmm.
It's more than Billie Eilish,
Yeah.
But that's if okay, of course there's naive, stupid people out there
Hmm.
who is walking, quite a narrow path, I suppose. But I'm surprised when people don't realize that it's just a human expression.
Hmm.
That what music is.
Yep.
It
Yeah,
doesn't matter. And to me, it doesn't really matter about genres anymore. I
hmm.
told you I'm turning 41 now, and if a song is good, then I like it. And if it's bad, I don't like it. And it doesn't have to be metal or anything. It's just music is a good thing.
Yeah, man. And also, that was one of the other overarching themes that came from your podcast to me was the idea that I think this was especially a conversation with Nog, that like even back in the day, there weren't so many clear distinctions between genres. Like
Yeah.
the way that super metal nerds will be like, well, this is, blackened thrash, or this is, progressive death and all this. We're like, when you talk to these older metal musicians who were, teenagers in the 90s and all of this, it's like it was all just either metal or like power metal, which used to mean something completely different from like nowadays it means Sabaton or something, right? But like
Yeah.
the idea that there wasn't even as recent as the 90s, the heavy metal even itself didn't have so many strict genre distinctions.
Yeah, in the 80s, if you listen to Metallica, Possessed, and others, Autopsy or Obituary or whatever, everything was thrash metal.
Yeah.
But one day, somebody coined the term death metal. And
Hmm.
then somebody found black metal, and then blah blah blah. People people want things to be special,
Hmm.
and they want to belong to this and that,
Hmm.
and be enemy with that thing, and that's just people are. This is what I don't like with people, is that you have to have clicks. They
Hmm.
create clicks, and it's totally unnecessary in my head.
Yeah, man.
Just let what is be.
Yeah, man, for sure. I agree with you there. It's I feel like the less walls people put up, the better. I mean, like
Yeah,
a genre.
why should a group of black metal fans hate another group of black metal fans? You know, what the fuck?
Yeah, it. I agree with you completely. It
I under
goes.
I and I understand the thing about things being more commercial or whatever.
Mhm.
Of course I understand that, but
Mhm.
you know, eh, yes, but at the same time, you know, can't we all just get along?
I mean, you're going to be playing in Midgardsblot. I see that happen in real time when like the Viking guys and the metalheads. Of course, there's a massive middle Venn diagram, right? But one of my favorite parts of going to Midgardsblot is watching the Vikings who don't listen to metal, which there are so many of them that go to this festival, right? They're on this side, but then the metalheads who think the Viking guys are a bunch of dipshit weirdos, right? They have to occupy the same space. And
Yeah.
it is so funny to me, like watching that happen. And that's one of my favorite parts of going because by the end of the weekend, everyone's friends, you know? Like, at least ideally.
We are playing Midgardsblot, I think maybe the third or fourth time this year,
Hmm.
and like you said, actually they have bridged a lot of different people, and
That's what I
I
love
think
about
that's
it.
yeah, I think it's great, and there's not just the purist thing going on.
Hmm.
It's a bit of everything, and you know, I like that. Maybe people who wasn't supposed to be exposed to my music will get exposure. Oh, maybe they like Mork or whatever,
Hmm.
or any other bands that's on the bill. And I think I'm not a Viking fan. I
Hmm.
don't do that stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
you didn't strike me as the type.
no, I don't dress up and do that stuff,
Yep.
But hey, I can appreciate and respect what they are doing
Hmm.
because it is, after all, our heritage.
Hmm.
It's a part of being Norwegian, and I think it's cool that they kind of bring that to the forefront because years back it all died because of religion and stuff
Hmm.
coming to our shores over here. So it's important to put a finger on, hey, this is what actually went down here. It's the Viking stuff,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
even more recently than that. I mean, I've talked to the organizers and the people who work at the museum, and a big problem from the time the museum was built, right, is the Nazi associations with the Vikings actually
That's
made
it's
it.
unfortunate, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that actually led to a lot of people just didn't want to talk about Vikings at all because
Yep.
it had that that scar on it, right? But
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's why I've really appreciated what black metal musicians did in the 90s as a counterculture, if you want to think of it that way. It was like enslaved writing lyrics in Old Norse in the 90s was insane for the time. And black metal does take on this dimension of preserving heritage in a really
Yeah.
unlikely place. And I will always, make the argument that today's Viking music is essentially just a kind of black metal that just started being played on acoustic instruments. Like when you actually look at the way those riffs are written on the toggle harpa or whatever, it's a
Yeah.
lot like it's a lot like a Burzum or a Darkthrone riff, just the
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
fifth,
yeah.
minor sixth, perfect fifth, and all that idea, right? So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and several Mork songs are also inspired by folkish,
Hmm.
not directly, I suppose, but some tonality, some folkish vibes.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's a
100%.
big part of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
man.
That's Norwegian.
Yeah, you can't escape what you are.
No, that's right. But it is correct what you're saying. There's a lot of right extremists that
Hmm.
walks around with a tattoo of Thor and the hammer and stuff. There's a
Yep.
lot of that.
I only had one more question for you, or I guess a
Sure.
conversation, and that was to sort of tee you up for. You made a face at the beginning when I called you an icon of
Yeah.
Norwegian black metal, and I know it's always weird to have someone else, say that for you. I'm not saying you have to think that you are, but at least for me, as an American who's very steeped in Norwegian music styles and all that, whenever someone asks me, you know, what's interesting in black metal, like I've been pointing to Udåd, like that album is interesting, right? Or the Mork albums, and so the reason I'm sort of stating my case, right, for referring to you as such is because I would love to just invite you to sort of have a platform for any, comments or anything you want to say just about, I guess, the black metal scene in general that we haven't already covered, sort of, observations or these or criticisms or just, what have you noticed about the black metal scene lately? Is there anything on your mind that you want to talk about?
First of all, thank you for what you were saying about me.
Yeah.
And to counter that, I am just me
Yep.
in my city alone, no scene, no whatever. And
You are the scene.
yeah, I can't really. I'm not able to look at myself from a distance and
Hmm.
tell if I have an impact or how important or whatnot. I'm just me, so I could never, recognize that stuff.
Hmm.
I don't have a lot of comments actually. Of course, I see things, here and there, and there's new bands coming along. There's a lot of trends. There, people. I think it's a bit funny that people are doing trends when trends is like a bad thing usually.
Yeah.
You know. So I don't know. It's a weird world, man.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Do you have
But
any
I can't.
trends off the top of your head?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Now it's the latest thing now is to be unknown. To be hooded or masked or whatever.
Yep.
I would say that's a trend.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like every time I see a new band being promoted to me, they're masked, which is,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I can't really say much because my music project was masked because my wife made me a mask. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but I also am completely aware of the fact that like masks are hot right now. I think a lot of it comes from Heilung. The whole fringe mask thing that they do is pretty big, but then who Ghost was really big for the masks as well, and I just feel like a lot of the oh, and of course Slipknot, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's yeah, I mean masks are I would agree with you that masks are really sexy right now.
Yeah, it's hot, I suppose. And hey, even I told you earlier that I wanted to release Udåd, without a face,
Hmm.
but I didn't really plan on performing live,
Hmm.
so I wasn't planning any hoods or anything
Hmm.
like that. But the important thing is that black metal now, it's not this little niche anymore. It's just a doors blown, not even the doors, the entire wall is blown off, and people are attacking it every way or
Hmm.
shape or form they want to. You told me about Western black metal,
Yeah, Wayfarer. Yeah, open up
yeah,
for Emperor next week.
and you have all kinds of variations of a dark music theme,
Hmm.
and that's just how it is. Every genre starts somewhere, and
Hmm.
at the beginning it's a small thing. I think every genre is like that, and even black metal, Oslo, Bergen back then with the few people killing each other,
Yeah.
whatever, and try to decide who was more pure, you know. But
Yeah.
then people start listening to that stuff and they pick it up, they like it. New bands form
Hmm.
after years. I come along, Mork came along in 2004.
Hmm.
That was like 15 years after, I suppose, it began in a way.
Hmm.
And that it will always be like that. People will have an urge to be creative, and people will recognize themselves in pieces of art on the wall or in a poem or in a movie. That's just how we are, screwed together as humans, and the same goes for black metal. It will just spread. People will associate with it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's actually something that's really fascinating to me about black metal is how translatable it is.
Yeah.
Like people from, I mean, right now I'm doing some preliminary work or research with Native American black metal. Black Braid blew up with that sort of with his style, but then when you peek under the hood, there is just so much going on with indigenous black metal, and so then you have this idea of like this music style that comes from Oslo is now resonating with like this indigenous experience in North America, and you get these bands like the Pan American Native Front or Mutilated Tyrant that are all putting this furious indigenous spin on just like the rage of black metal. And I think what you said is, anger, right? And like hate and like evil and darkness are
Yeah.
these very relatable ideas, right? That
Yeah,
sort of
and and
yeah.
and roots and heritage,
Yes. Yep.
you know,
Exactly,
the
man.
urkraften we're
Yeah.
talking about is all over the world, but in different voices.
I love the way this just came around full circle. We start with urkraft, and now I think we're both winding down, finishing it up with urkraft again. Uh,
Yeah, but I think, one thing that's obvious, why that's also a sort of point of why people are fighting over black metal is
mhm.
that don't don't say you're something that you're not. You can't be from, Albania and play Norwegian black metal, or you know what I mean? It's
Yep.
just use black metal as a, kind of a wide term. It's
Hmm.
an umbrella with several branches.
Yeah, yep.
Or it's a tree with several branches. That's a better way to put it. Not an umbrella. I don't know where that came from, but
I want one of these branched umbrellas he's talking about.
merchandise.
That's going to be the first Udåd merch. I love it. Yeah. Sell them at Midgardsblot when it inevitably rains for an entire day.
Necro Mary Poppins.
Oh, beautiful, man. Well, Thomas, as I said at the beginning, black metal has been a big blind spot on this channel for way too long. I don't know, it wasn't intentional, it just sort of happened that way. And so I do really appreciate you sort of, being the guinea pig of sort of coming on to the Nordic Sound and having this great conversation with you about this pretty, significant, I would call it significant genre in terms of Norway's music heritage.
I suppose it's the biggest one for Norway, so you
Yep.
can't argue with that. It's our cultural export. It's black
Yes,
metal.
100%,
And
man.
I hope I didn't, destroy the illusion too much for you guys. But that was not really the point here, because the
Yep.
point is that we appreciate our heritage, we appreciate music in general, and
Hmm.
there's something, either you resonate with the atmosphere or you don't. That's
Hmm.
just how it is, and that goes for all genres. And I appreciate being. I suppose I'm the first one on your show then,
Yeah,
from
so I
my.
had first black metal musician, 100%. I had are you familiar with Jotun? Eotun? Everyone
Yeah,
pronounces it
from Denmark.
differently. Yeah, they're like a Denmark Faroese. They have
Yeah, yeah,
I'm forgetting his name, the same singer for Hamferth. Um, yeah, so I had Jesper on 2 years ago when their first album came out.
yeah.
But that's like the only other like straight up metal musician that I've had on the channel. Um,
Then I would just say I'm honored and thank you.
yeah,
I thought maybe I was one of many. So
no, I mean it's weird because I go to this. A big part of this podcast is the whole Midgardsblot promotion, and also covering and interviews and all of that. I have no idea. I'm looking at my list of interviews I've done. I'm like, where the fuck are the metal musicians? Like I was a metalhead before I was anything else, so I have no idea how that just slipped my mind. But anyway, no man, it's been a real pleasure. It was great to talk to you. If I can also just say one more thing about the illusion. I think the illusion conversation. I think it's important to just understand that they are illusions. That doesn't mean that you can't enjoy them or participate in them because that's always been what art has been about.
yeah,
Is sort of and maybe even calling it illusion may be a little intense. Maybe it misrepresents what it is. But I don't know. I think that like it's worth knowing when something is a performance, and it's
yeah,
worth knowing when to separate the performance from the person because things can get churches can burn down and singer and musicians can get murdered when you don't separate the persona from the actual person, right?
yeah. And you can't really dictate how strong a person feels the vibe in music.
Yep.
You can't dictate that.
Yep. Exactly.
Because that is what makes this pure and true, is how strong you feel the music you know
Awesome, man. So, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? If we're going to follow you, I don't know, get into an argument with you in a comment section, where can they do so?
oh no, I stay away from the internet in that way.
Good call.
I figured that early on, that's just poison.
Yeah, I completely
So,
agree.
and the funny part about internet is that people are arguing just for the sake of arguing, and then you lose me. I don't see the point in that at all.
Hmm.
So kindly fuck off. And but check out the socials. Just you will find Mork and Udåd if you search for it.
Hmm.
And perhaps we're nearby doing a concert or whatever. Then show up. You know, and you know, to any new listeners, I would just say welcome and thanks.
Of
But
course.
I need to ask you: Are you going to Midgardsblot this year?
Oh, yep. Yep. Me and my wife. It'll be my wife's first time in Norway. It'll be my fourth. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to be hanging out at Midgardsblot, and then we're going to be bumming around in Oslo for a few days afterwards.
So we can probably meet up then.
Yeah, man. I'd love to grab a beer with you or something.
Yeah, because we are playing. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was so stoked because I didn't get to fully appreciate it the last time I saw you guys because I was being pulled in so many different directions. I've chilled out, I've mellowed out over the years, and so now I'm just gonna come and hang.
let's do that. Just stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So yeah, just hang out after I stop the recording, but otherwise, Tomas, thank you so much for coming on the Nordic Sound. It was a pleasure, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Tusen takk.
Tusen talk, man.